Rebecca's War by Ann Finlayson. Frederick Warne and Company, New York and London. Copyright by Ann Finlayson, 1970. Library of Congress Catalog number 78183735. For Anne and the Noms. Rebecca's War, occupied city. The Ransoms could hear the enemy drums the minute they opened the window, less faint, already in the few minutes it had taken them to creep up the ladder stairs from the second floor. Sa-tum, sa-tum, sa-tum. Rebecca could all but feel the marching beats draw closer, closer, closer. They're coming in on the Germantown pike, Tom said grimly, leaning out. They'll be in Second Street any minute. Here, hold the glass. Rebecca took the battered old telescope from his hand, then had to prop up the window sash with a stick. For the Ransom windows had long since given up their lead counterweights to be melted down for bullets. When her brother was firmly astraddle the dormer roof, Rebecca handed him the spyglass. They then hiked up her skirts and crawled out in his wake. After a rather scary scramble up the sloping cedar shingles, she slid into place beside him, feet dangling and her body carefully balanced. Rather breathlessly, she peered up Front Street. See anything yet? Telescope to his eye, Tom shook his head. Front Street lay only 1 block from Second, but Rebecca could see for herself that the house roofs and garden walls obscured all but a narrow view. Still, the ground rose higher north of Vine, and the Ransoms would probably see the troops as they topped the rise. How do you know they'll come in on Second? She asked. Main, North, South Street. Stands to reason. Rebecca craned her neck. Yes, they had a fairly clear view of Second and Vine. I hope you're right. But for a moment she forgot that oncoming drum, for there it lay at her feet, William Penn's Green Market town, with the steel blue Delaware at its front door and the Governor's Woods at its back. It had been a long time since she last climbed up to the dormer roof for a view of her city. After all, young ladies of 14 had to think of deportment. And now she drank it in. The Philadelphia look was red brick and white trim, white marble doorsteps, white painted shutters, and sloping cellar doors. Brick-walled gardens beside brick-paved footwalks. Sturdy cedar posts set a dozen feet apart marked the edge of the pedestrian path, and beyond them the roadway began, paved with round stone from the Trenton Falls, and lighted every moonless night by the fine new Franklin lamps, flat panned and ventilated so that they would not cloud up. And above it all soared the white towers. Christ Church, the State House, Carpenter's Hall, nothing ornamental about the Quaker City, nothing that would shock the sober broad brims, built solid of the best materials. It was a neat, substantial city, proud of its well-thought-out design, its public hospital, its circulating library, and philosophical society, its busy shipyard, its many churches of every denomination, its college and academy. A deep-water port, the capital of a smiling province, a city of culture and religion and intellectual life. Philadelphia was not yet a century old, and already she ranked as the largest metropolis in North America and the second largest in the British Empire itself. But just now, a nearly empty metropolis. A block away, where the land rolled sharply downhill to the Delaware River, the close-packed buildings along King Street were shuttered and silent, their abandoned wharfs projecting out into the water like fingers clutching after the city's vanished commerce. The shipyards lay deserted, some with half-ribbed hulls, still upright in their cradles, like so many beached whales, and the produce stalls in Market Street stood vacant and empty. An occasional urchin ran through the streets toward the sound of the drum. A Quaker lady or two, prim under her cap and flat-crowned beaver, walked abroad to show she trusted in the Lord. But most Philadelphians had locked their doors and shuttered their windows and were keeping indoors to wait and see. Those who remained in the city at all, that is. But in this third year of the War of Independence, nearly half had fled. For weeks people had been leaving, warned by the guns from the Brandywine, warned by the expresses pounding into town on lathery horses, warned by the disaster-filled dispatches they delivered to the Congress, warned by the proclamations predicting desperate times at hand. A week ago Congress itself had fled, and with it the Pennsylvania Assembly and the Supreme Executive Council. And then the final grim preparations had begun, the city's bells removed and carried off for safekeeping, boats sent upriver to the Jersey Creek, cattle driven away out of the enemy's reach, papers and records packed up and carted off to York. And last of all had come the message from Sir William Howe. Tomorrow a division of my troops under Major General Earl Cornwallis will occupy your city. So now Philadelphia waited, nervous but not quite panicked, for her new masters, and the distant drum marked its oncoming steps. Ta-tum, ta-tum, ta-tum. Tom lowered the spyglass in frustration and turned to Rebecca. We should have gone to the Colburns' house. Then we'd be right on 2nd Street. The Colburns? But they fled to Reading. One of their side shutters has a weak catch. I could get in as easy as easy. What? Break into an empty house? Our own friends? Tom Ransom, what a wicked... You think they won't break in? He jerked his chin toward the sound of the drum. You'll see. The ones who ran away are the ones who'll be sorry. He put the glass back to his eye. We could get a really good view from the Colburns. Break in. Rebecca surveyed the disagreeable possibility. It was one thing to know the enemy was going to enter and take possession of your city. It was quite another to think of him invading your very house. And the Colburns had always been best friends with the Ransom. Letitia with Rebecca, David with John, and little Isaac with Amelia. You think they'll break into our house? Not if we're here, stupid. Just the empty. All very well for Tom to say, but how can he be sure? There were all those stories about the Jerseys last year. Jewelry and plate seized, houses ransacked, livestock stolen. Up to now, occupation had seemed, if anything, rather like fun. Oh, bad, of course, terrible, tragic to be defeated, to see the cause laid low, but she had to admit, exciting, too. Now, however, Rebecca was viewing it from close up, and remembering suddenly that the regulars had had a bad reputation as ruffians and gallows birds. Are they going to burn and loot, do you think? Rebecca asked her brother, trying not to sound quavery. Tom shot her a quick, annoyed look. Don't be dumb. Why should they burn and loot? They need the city. That's why they're taking it. Well, last year in Jersey, that's different, he said quickly. That was mostly Hessians. There'll be Hessians with Cornwallis, too. Oh, nothing will happen to you. They don't make war on girls. To avoid her, he put the telescope back to his eye and made a fierce survey of the empty Delaware. For some reason, this line of talk was irritating Tom. Strange, because he was the most rabid liberty man in the family, worse than Ursula, and had always been glad to hear the enemy denounced. In books, soldiers always burn and loot and commit repine. She offered, and when he made no reply, she added, what if they break in and take Mother's candlesticks and the pier glasses? I think we should have taken them down to the tunnel the way Ursula wanted. Ursula, he scoffed. Her and her gross daddy in the old country. Well, look what they did to General Wayne at Paoli last week. Sneaked up in the dark and stabbed everybody left and right. That's the kind of people. That was a battle, a surprise attack. You don't think they'll go around bayoneting civilians, do you? Besides, that's just the point. They say Wayne lost. He caught himself, biting off the last word, and again applied his gaze diligently to the telescope. Wayne lost what? She demanded after a minute. He did not answer. Rebecca stared hard at her brother, looting and burning forgotten. A horrible suspicion filled her. She had seen this behavior once before in John, their older brother, in the spring of '75, and John had taken up a musket and marched away and never came back. Tom, she tried again. What is it? What are you thinking? What did you mean about General Wayne? For answer, he clapped his telescope shut, announced, I'm going down, and slid off the roof tree and in at the dormer window, almost in one motion. Tommy, Tommy, wait! But Rebecca was slower and more awkward than her brother, and had skirts to manage. By the time she had edged down to the window and crawled back inside the garret room, he was nowhere to be seen. She unpropped the sash and clambered down the ladder to the second floor as fast as she could, positive now that he was about to abandon them. Sure enough, she found him in the back bedroom he shared with Peter, their small brother, dragging shirts and woolen stockings out of his trunk. Peter and his sister Amelia, who had been watching for the soldiers from the front bedroom window, stood by wide-eyed. Look, he's packing his clothes, 8-year-old Amelia pointed out. Does that mean he's going away? Why is he going away? Where is he going? Doesn't he want to wait and see the soldiers? Don't you want to wait and see the soldiers, Tom? They'll be here any minute, won't they, Rebecca? Ursula says. Rebecca said what one always said to Amelia. Keep still, Amelia. Well, Tom, are you going? I guess you know, he said sullenly, General Wayne lost 200 men at Pioli. Somebody has to replace them. Rebecca stared at him sickly. But what frightened her most, more even than the thought of the soldiers robbing and injuring them, was being left in charge. Ursula Kim was the only grown-up in the house, and she was merely a bound girl and never took responsibility for anything larger than dinner. And with Mother and John dead, and Father and Will off on the seas of pirateering, and Tom going to leave, Rebecca would have to be the head of the Ransom house, and she just couldn't have it all depend on her. It was too much. She was barely 14. Besides, Tom could die just like John, of camp fever or the bloody flu or the smallpox or even a bullet. And before that happened, he would suffer starvation and pain and perhaps march barefoot in the snow. They had given one brother to the war, and another was serving too in his own way. Tom was the oldest at home, and he was all they had left. General Wayne didn't need him nearly so much as the family did. We don't even have enough money to get through the winter. What will we do without someone to cut firewood and fish? Sell the brandy. That's what Father left it for. I've been telling you that all along. You're only 15, not even old enough for the militia, she said, trying to keep her voice level. Tears and hysterics would only disgust Tom. She had to reason with him. They'll take me. If I have to, I'll learn to beat a drum. How will you even get to General Wayne? Cornwallis and his troops are between us and the army. I'll go through the woods, slip around them. He had an answer for everything. She watched in silence as he wrapped his few belongings in an old cloak of John's and tied it up with a piece of cordage. What would be the best way to change his mind? You're leaving us without a man in the house at all, and just when they're coming in. They're not barbarians, and even if they were, what good could I do? None. But I can do some good fighting with Wayne. Doggedly, he shouldered his bundle, donned his shabby tricorn, and trudged downstairs. Rebecca stood uncertain for a moment, then decided it was too early to give up. She hadn't even touched on the really important argument. She straightened her cap, retied her apron, caught up a shawl from the hall chest, and followed her brother out into Front Street. It's no use, he said, as she fell into step beside him. I'm going, and that's that. Won't you just wait even 2 weeks, 1 week, just till we hear that Father and Will are safe? They're overdue now, and in a day or two we're sure. How are we going to hear? They'll never make it to the city, not with the king's ships all over Delaware. And if they put in at Boston or somewhere, how will they get word to us through the lines? He shifted the bundle on to his other shoulder. Besides, I'll never have so good a chance to get out of the city as I do now." Rebecca took a deep breath. She didn't like using this argument. It was unfair, but it was all she had left. "Tom, what about your promise?" She reminded him and saw at once that she had hit home. "That was a peacetime promise," he said after a minute. Father had no way of knowing. "You made it again last spring, and you know it," she said, swiftly pressing her advantage, "just before they sailed. Promise me you'll stay in school and take your degree and be somebody. That's what Father said, and you said you would. How do we even know the academy will stay open? The Union School in Germantown is closing down. The academy is high church, madly loyalist. It's in no danger." She had him on the defensive now. Talking fast, she reminded him of the family arrangement, that Father and Will would go to sea and make the ransom riches. Tom would stay in school, and one day make them famous. First it was to be William, she went on relentlessly. But no, nothing would do, but he had to go to sea. Then it was to be John. No need to mention what happened to John. Now you. "I know, I know. You don't have to tell me." But as they turned into Market Street, his steps were slowing down. "It was Mother's dying wish to have one of her sons a lawyer. You gave Father your solemn word you'd stay in school, Tom, your solemn—" She stopped. Tom caught her arm, and the two stood gaping at the sight just ahead of them. A group of mounted men in red and green jackets had come clattering out of the second street and drawn rein before the old courthouse in the middle of Market Street. They dismounted, removed their crested helmets, wiped their brows with their forearms, restored the helmets, and gazed about them. A smell of stables rose from them and filled Market Street. "Tories!" Tom said, with such venom that Rebecca was forced to bite back and remark that the helmets were sort of adorable. "Listen," she said instead. "The drums are much louder." They were indeed a perfect thunder. Suddenly their tempo changed, and they were joined by the shrilling whistle of fifes. "God save great George, our King!" At the corner, Rebecca peered timidly up Second Street, and there they were. Grenadiers, mostly. Half-regulars in caps of fur, half-mustached Germans in tall, brass-fronted mitres. The British had occupied Philadelphia. One or two civilians in the street raised a cheer, and a woman in the short gown of a servant girl shook her fist at the Germans, crying, "Werde mit Hessen, Wardam Kampf, ihr für English, König, Yen, Get, Jüger, Ingen, Lassen, Summit, Eck." "Hessians, why do you come here to fight for the English king against your own kinsmen? Shame on you." But the few remaining spectators, the ransoms among them, stood transfixed. After a moment a mounted officer rode up and said something to the dragoons that sent them back into their saddles, and rode off down Second Street with the troop at his heels. The foot soldiers followed. Evidently they were going to camp south of the city, and as they passed her, Rebecca took a close and avid look. The king's troops were splashed with mud, perhaps, and not so spruce as they might be on parade, but they didn't, Rebecca had to admit to herself, look much like gallows birds and ruffians. When a small boy fell into step beside him, a burly regular tweaked his ear. "Tom," she said, "they look ordinary." But he was staring up the street at something else, and his eyes were blazing. "Look! Look there! Our new masters!" At first she thought it was the gold-braided officers now riding past them that he meant, but the next minute she caught sight of the civilians in their company. "Why, isn't that Mr. Galloway and the Allens?" Indeed, Rebecca recognized them all, for they had been prominent Philadelphians before they had abandoned their city last year to join the British. "They'll be in charge now, I suppose," said Tom curiously. "And won't old Galloway make the Liberty men smart for it? Well, that settles it for me. Father wouldn't expect me to see my city turned over to those old Tory goats and not do anything to throw them out." Aghast, Rebecca caught his arm. "Tommy, you can't abandon us. You can't. But he shook her off and reshouldered his bundle. his face showing plainly that she had lost her last chance to keep him from running off to join the army. "Tommy, wait," she said. "Please, please." Instead, he half turned, saluted her with a wave, crossed Second Street between two oncoming supply wagons, and vanished up Market Street. So it had happened then. They'd all gone off and left her to hold the family together. The thought numbed her. She stood frozen, gazing from the spot where Tom had disappeared into the distant backs. oh, to the distant backs of the triumphant Mr. Galloway and the soldiers who were going to place him in charge of the city. Finally, they too vanished, and she still stood. "I've got to go home and face it," she kept telling herself, but her feet remained rooted. At last, after half an hour or more, Rebecca managed to bestir herself. With dragging feet, she headed back down Market to Front. "We'll get along," she encouraged herself. "We always have, and Father will be home soon, and we just have to survive the occupation, that's all." And that was the moment when a pair of large hands grabbed her, one over her mouth, the other around her waist, and dragged her into a narrow alley behind a tavern.
Chapter 2. William. For the first moment, surprise and terror held her paralyzed. Then, with a wrench, she got a leg free and began to squirm and kick backward at her assailant, and was rewarded with a yelp of pain. "Hang it, Rebecca, that's my shin," he growled in her ear. In self-defense, he loosened his grip enough that she could twist around and get a look at him. "Will," she gasped. "Will Ransom, where in the—" He clapped a hand over her mouth with a warning hiss. "Look, it'll be the hulks for me if the lobsters find out we're in town. Keep it down." He released her warily. She lowered her voice, but she was so glad to see him that she couldn't restrain the tears. Will, you're home. Just in time. Where's Father? Where's the huntress? How did you—" "Keep still, Rebecca," he said sternly, as if she were as young as Amelia. "I want you to get Tom and bring him to me here. Now. It's swinishly important." "Tom? But Tom's gone off to enlist." "What?" "I tried to stop him, Will." She described her efforts to head Tom off, then what happened when he saw the soldiers and the Tory civilians. "Of all the stupid— and at a time like this, too." Muttering under his breath, Will stamped furiously back and forth across the alley, paused to pound his fist against the wall, then resumed his stamping. At last he stopped and turned to her abruptly. "See here, is it true what we've been hearing? Lost a battle recently?" "Yes, at Brandywine Creek. That's how the British got between him and the city. Then they caught Wayne at Paoli a few days later and cut him up badly. That's why Tom went, to join Wayne. Will, what is this about? Why are you here? Where you're in danger from the lobsters? Where are Father and the ship? Has anything happened to it?" "They're all right," he said vaguely, and began to stamp and mutter some more. Once he stopped, looked her over speculatively, then went back to muttering. Finally he threw up his hands and said, "I'll just have to trust the whole thing to you," and drew her further into the recesses of the alley. "It's our cargo, you see." "What cargo?" "Powder. 200 stand of Charleville muskets, saltpeter, and lead for ball. We have to get it to the army. If they've had 2 battles, they'll need it more than ever." Rebecca's eyes widened. "Then the huntress is here. But how?" No, of course she's not here. The Delaware is crawling with men of war." "No, Father has stood out to sea, and we're to rendezvous with him in 3 days' time at the Capes. Teddy and I loaded up, that is, we rowed up river. 2 nights it took us from Cape Henlopen, slipping past the guard boats. Then when we get here, the lobsters are in possession." "But how will you unload? And what can I do?" Will was calmer now. "Maybe I'd better start at the beginning. Look, we had bad luck at first, went weeks without sighting another sail. Then in July, luck changed. Caught a fat sugar ship in the Windward Passage, fresh out of Kingston. Then 2 more right after. With 3 good prizes in tow, Captain Ransom thought it might be worthwhile trying to sell the cargoes in Europe, where he could get a better price. Sometimes Sometimes the French admitted American privateers to their harbors. Sometimes they didn't. But it was worth chancing. So they had steered the schooner for France, slipped past patrolling British vessels, and made it safely to Nancy. There, Captain Ransom was engaged in selling the seized ships and their cargoes when he was approached by an agent of Caron de Beaumarchais, who was himself an agent of King Louis XVI, through whom aid was secretly funneled to the rebellious American colonies, and asked, since he was master of a fast armed vessel, to undertake delivery of the desperately needed munitions. Father thought it was our duty to agree, to get what we could while the getting was good. You know what he says about the French. Rebecca remembered only too well. Captain Ransom liked the French, but he did not trust them any further than he could throw the palace at Versailles. They never form alliances, he liked to say, unless they think they can thereby outsmart some third party. They'll never join us in this war until we prove we can win it without them. The worse the news from America, the fewer supplies were forthcoming. And in 1777, all the news seemed to be bad. Burgoyne's double invasion from Canada, partly down the Mohawk and partly down Lake Champlain, was aiming for Albany and the control of the Hudson. General Clinton held New York City and the Middle Hudson and Howe. Nobody knew where Howe would strike. Father thought this might be the last cargo of arms we could get from them, so he talked the crew around. We're on shares, you know, and have a right to help decide on matters like that. But Father can always get the rest of us to see things his way. Yes, he's good at that, Rebecca agreed. She doted on her handsome, energetic father, tall and so well built that he easily met Philadelphia's standard of a fine male figure. His breeches stayed put above his hips and his stockings above his calves. She wished he were here right now. In fact, instead of Will, to make her feel good about what was coming. She had the sinking feeling that Will was about to dump in her lap a responsibility that would make being head of the family seem like child's play. The news from home was bad before we left France, Will resumed. Burgoyne grabbing up all the forts on the lakes. Howe about to pounce, all that. But we had no idea the city would actually fall. So we stood in for Delaware Bay as usual, keeping a sharp watch for the Roebuck and Liverpool and the other lobster frigates. But instead of a few patrol vessels, there was a whole fleet. He wiped his forehead in memory of the shock. What did you do? Well, they saw us too, of course, but they were well downwind. One tried to lure us close with a distress signal, but that trick won't work anymore, and we slipped them easily. Then we held a conference. We didn't know how many other ports were still free, and we wanted to get the stuff offloaded. For one thing, it's no particular treat to be sitting on a cargo of gunpowder, so it seemed to us that the sensible thing was to land the bulk of it in some isolated cove, hide it well, let Washington or the Congress or somebody know where it is, then hightail it out to sea. So that's what we did. And 2 nights ago, Teddy and I took the ship's boat, rowed upriver by night without speaking any other vessels, and landed here about an hour ago with a message. But Will, if the cargo is so important, why didn't you leave your message with one of the ports downriver? They're still in American hands. We would have if we'd known the city had been occupied, but we didn't know. And what with all the king's ships in the river, it seemed safer to keep out of sight and make for the city. Then when we get here, what do we find? He threw up his hands again. I thought, if I can just get hold of Tom, he'll get word through easily enough. Nobody notices a boy that age. He can slip through Hal's lines. But now, well, it will just have to be you. Rebecca stared at her brother numbly. You want me to slip through General Hal's lines? No, I just want you to. He stopped, stared hard at her, bit his lip, stamped some more, threw up his arms, and gave a gusty sigh. Look, can I trust you? Rebecca wanted to say, no, you can't, I'm too young. But with Will's eyes burning into hers, she could not do it. I guess, she muttered. Can I trust you entirely? Not to talk to anyone, no matter what happens. I can keep a secret if that's all you mean. Not to anyone, not to Ursula, not to Letitia Coburn, not to the neighbors, not to Amelia, especially not to Amelia. His very intensity was increasing her alarm, but her curiosity as well. She studied his sun-browned face for a clue. What is all this, Will? What is it you want from me? I want you to keep something safe. Several things, in fact. plus a paragraph of directions written in a numbered code. That's the place where we landed the arms, a deserted farm. It's in the barn, covered with tarpaulins and straw. The coded passage tells the latitude and longitude of the cove, and also gives directions for finding it from landward. Who put it in code? Father and I. But it's not a code, just a hastily drawn-up cipher based on Norrie's epitome. Each number refers to a page, a line, and a word. It's an extra precaution in case the thing should fall into British hands. I see. But you're not to let it fall into British hands, here? Put it in the secret drawer. You know where that is? You mean with the brandy? No, in Mother's room, the chest on chest. Seeing by her puzzled expression that she didn't know what he was talking about, he explained. The lowest drawer of the chest has a false bottom. Feel along the back side of the drawer, press with your fingers, and eventually you'll release the spring. A part of the floor of the drawer pops up, and there's the opening. Not very deep, maybe 1.5 inches, but it's enough to hold papers and things. Grandfather kept all his records there. That seemed logical enough for Rebecca. Grandfather Ransom had been a wily old rogue in his day, a privateer in 2 wars and a smuggler in between, and he would have needed a secret place for his business papers. The whole house, in fact, was riddled with trick staircases and papered-over closets. There was even a tunnel from the cellar laundry to the Delaware. That's the first thing, William went on as Rebecca tucked the paper down the neck of her dress. Here's the second. It was an ordinary-looking letter superscribed, Captain William Ransom on board the brig Charming Sally. The seal had been broken. I don't understand. It's just an old letter of Father's. William smiled craftily. That's what people are supposed to think. Inside, it's a letter from Dr. Franklin in France to Robert Morris on state business. Our Mr. Morris? For many years, Captain Ransom had skippered ships for the firm of Willing and Morris, which gave his children a mild proprietary interest in the wealthy merchant. That's right. I suppose, like everybody else, he's left town. Yes, but Mr. Willing. For God's sake, no. Willing would take it straight to the lobsters. Just keep it. Maybe. Oh, we'll see if we can't get word to the Congress somehow. Through Boston, maybe. Though the coast is crawling with the king's ships. Or Charleston. Yes, perhaps a southern port would be safer. I have it. William took a knife out and cut a button off his coat. It was brass and had an intertwined W.R. cut into it. Keep this button, he said, handing it to her. When someone comes along and shows you its mate, that's the person to give the letter and map to. Rebecca stared at the button, her heart lightening a little. If that was all, just hold the things till a man showed up and claimed them. That wasn't so bad, just so it didn't all depend on her. That's all, is it? And one other thing. I want you to keep some lead ingots for me. We'll hide them in the stairs. Lead ingots? Why didn't you leave them at the farmhouse with the rest of the stuff? Oh, he said vaguely, we thought this much might be needed. But, Rebecca, I haven't got time to argue. Now look, Teddy and I are hiding in a cove upriver. We'll come down to the city after dark, unload at the tunnel, and carry the stuff into the house. Meet us there with a lantern at 10 o'clock. Is that understood? Don't light the lantern. Just be there at the tunnel mouth at 10 and have the lantern with you. All right. And don't let Ursula see you or she'll scream the town down. With that, William peered out at the street, pulled his tricorn down over his brow as low as he could, and set off with rapid strides toward the waterfront. Rebecca stood watching as long as he was in sight, then bent her steps homeward, head spinning. Letters, maps, lead ingots, Father, the huntress, Beaumarchais. Was she dreaming, or had she actually run into her brother Will and been told some crazy story about a secret cargo? Well, the papers were real enough. She could feel them crackling under her dress. She dawdled no longer. Redcoats were beginning to appear in the streets. The soldiers must have been dismissed as soon as they made camp. And what if one of them heard the paper crackle and demanded to know what she was concealing? In fact, as she rounded Front Street, she all but cannoned into a grenadier sergeant. He fended her off, saying, "You want to watch them corners, miss," and went his way. But it had been a bad moment. And then when she neared her own doorstep, she had a worse one. For there, some papers in one hand, and the other poised to knock, stood a king's officer. Chapter 3, The Secret Cargo. Frozen to the pavement, Rebecca stared as the officer knocked and Ursula opened. He touched his hat, read something from one of his papers, and tried to enter. Officers, Ursula shrilled at him. I give you officers once already. Get out from my house, you redcoat you. Ursula's English was half German. She shook a broom in his face and tried to slam the door, but he gamely kept his foot in it and called up reinforcements in the form of 2 privates. At that point, Rebecca came to life, hurried up the steps, and put herself between Ursula and the men. What is it, sir? She demanded, trembling. He stared. Who are you? I'm the lady of the house. Keep still, Ursula. Ursula pretended to return to her house-cleaning chores. Oh? He looked her over uncertainly, then made a sketchy gesture toward his hat. Your servant, miss. My name is Hargreaves. I'm the king's barrack master, and I wish to inspect these premises to see how many officers I am to billet here. Officers? Here? She cried in dismay. But you can't. You have no right to quarter soldiers on us. Your own laws. Her own laws are for the protection of His Majesty's loyal subjects, and not for a parcel of rebels and outlaws. His willingness to accept her as the person in charge, worth arguing with, had stiffened her spine. Now she began to think. She had to keep him out. There was no one else to do it. Would playing innocent work? What makes you think we're rebels and outlaws? She said, trying it on. Lots of people in Philadelphia remain true to their allegiance. The officer consulted one of his papers. This is the residence of one William Ransom, mariner, is it not? Yes, my father. Ursula, don't mutter. Owner and master of the vessel Huntress, at present sailing under letter of marque from the so-called Supreme Executive Council of Pennsylvania? Rebecca nodded glumly. She should have known. They could get all that kind of information they needed from Galloway and the other Tories. Very well, then, by virtue of the fact that the owner of this property is thus engaged in activities against the peace and safety of His Majesty's subjects at sea, these premises are hereby expropriated. He gazed at her blandly, resting his case. There was nothing to be done. Rebecca stood aside in silence and let him enter, which he did with a slight bow. He looked over their white-painted little hall, with its framed engravings of industry and idleness, and the light place on the wall where the king's portrait used to hang. He glanced into the parlor in front, the little-used dining room at the back. They eat in the kitchen, I fancy, his cool gaze seemed to say, and then into the pantry under the stairs. Then he trudged upstairs to inspect the bedrooms. Rebecca had never been ashamed of their little brick house, laid out plain and asymmetrical by her seeming grandfather, but now she burned with humiliation as it lay open to a stranger's casual inspection. She ran up the stairs as though to protect it. 3 sleeping chambers on this floor, I see, he commented to her. One quite a fair size, and the others? Just Ursula's, Miss Kimes, but that's in the garret, sir. She gestured jerkily toward the ladder-like stairs at the back of the upper hall. In addition to the ground floor, there are just this story in the garret, and the cellar. That's where the kitchen and laundry rooms are. She nearly added a defiant, we eat in the kitchen. But kitchens and laundry rooms were not his concern. How many apartments in the garret? Just Ursula's room at the back, over the 2 rooms, and an empty one at the front, over the big one. Then there's also a closet for storing things. Excellent. Are you going to put officers up there? I was thinking, he said a trifle stiffly, that there were ample accommodations for the family, in the event that I must fill the sleeping apartments. Rebecca's jaw dropped open, but she had presence of mind enough not to burst out at him. When her anger was under control, she thought, try pathos, work on his sympathies. Look, she said, there's nobody living here but women and children. The housekeeper, she nodded at Ursula, my little sister and brother and me. I can assure you that the king's officers will not molest you in any way. It's not that, it's just, well, it isn't suitable to have a lot of strange men tramping in and out. Can't worry about suitability in wartime, miss. But he did begin to look uneasy, chewing his lip and shuffling through his papers. There must be other houses where you can billet men, Rebecca pressed on. Tory houses, where they'd be glad and proud to welcome you. Please? She tried to shrink together and look small and helpless. Hang it, miss, the city is going to be most frightfully crowded when the main body of the king's forces gets here. We will need every room. Indeed, you are fortunate to be selected as officers' quarters, for eventually we will need to commandeer quarters for the troops. For the troops? In private houses? If necessary. Look here, miss, having an officer in the house will be a protection for you. Men get restless and rowdy in winter quarters, and you may find the presence of epaulets most reassuring. I don't see how, Rebecca retorted stoutly. The troops aren't going to get rowdy in here, and out there in the streets the officer won't be around. For once she had stumped him. After a minute he said, See here, I'll do this much for you. For the present, I'll quarter only one officer on you. One man with a single servant. That will have to do. But, I'm sorry, miss, if the circumstances weren't so unusual, I wouldn't consider such a concession. Indeed, I may eventually have to rescind that. Your lodger will, of course, supply his own firing and candles and take his meals elsewhere. Good day to you. He nodded, crossed to the door, and departed. Ursula pulled the door open, stuck her head through it, and shrilled after him. Du Englischer Schweinhund, and a few other Teutonic epithets. Little Amelia, who had been unwontedly quiet during the exchange, now sought information. We're going to have an officer staying here, are we, Rebecca? We're going to have an officer staying here? Will he be mean? What will happen when Father and Will come home? Will they put them in jail? Will they, Rebecca? Keep still, Amelia. But Rebecca spoke absently, hand to her mouth. She had just remembered the papers she was carrying in her dress, and Will coming to the house tonight. The crisis with the officer had put it quite out of her head. Ursula slammed the door. What gives them to come in and break the house already? Just like my grossdad in the old country when the Jaeger come. Ach, if my brother Klaus was here, he'd tell them once. Quiet, Ursula, I'm trying to think. What is with Tom, Miss Becky? He is gone, ja? Yes, I couldn't talk him out of it. Tom, that was so long ago she'd clean forgotten it altogether. What a day, one catastrophe after another. What kind of officer will it be, Rebecca? Will it be a general? Will it be General Howe or General Cornwallis? Or, Rebecca didn't wait for more. When she was halfway up the stairs, Ursula yelled after her. Maybe now you listen to me and down take your mama's good stuff to that tunnel. The mention of Mother's things reminded Rebecca of the trick drawer. She could at least get the telltale papers safely hidden. She slipped inside the big front bedroom, which took up nearly half the second floor, and closed the door behind her. It was the handsomest room in Ransom's little house, the only one furnished with real English pieces. Four-post bed with cool work curtains, twin gumly pier glasses, 2 Windsor chairs, wing chair by the fire, Worcester porcelain chamber set, tapestry work fire screen, and the great Chippendale chest on chest. Every voyage back in the days when he was sailing for William Morris, her father had brought back at least one piece for this room. Grandfather Ransom had slept here, and later it had sheltered Captain and Mrs. Ransom. She had died in the big bed, shortly after Peter's birth, and though it was unoccupied at the moment, it was always called Mother's room. I'll move us in here, Rebecca thought. Amelia and Peter and me. That will make sure the officer doesn't get it. She crossed the floor and knelt down before the chest. The bottom drawer came out easily enough. She removed the bedsheets it contained and felt along the back side of the drawer, as instructed, pressing in with her fingers. There was a soft thud, and part of the bottom popped up. Rebecca felt around inside. The secret compartment held a few old letters and a slim account book, nothing of interest. She dug the papers out of her dress, slipped them into the opening, and pressed down the popped-up part till it clicked into place. When the linen had been restored and the drawer closed, she heaved a sigh of relief. There, now she could think. But the more she thought, the more impossible the whole thing seemed. Suppose the officer moved in today. Will would be walking right into a trap. And even if Will got in and out all right, where did that leave Rebecca? Right in the enemy's lap with a fistful of dangerous papers. No, that much was certain. Will would have to take back the map and the Franklin letter. She would go to meet him as agreed, warn him off, and return the papers. And why, she wondered, struck by a new thought, hadn't she asked Will for money? The family purse was getting desperately light. Captain Ransom had expected to be back long before this, but even so, what with prices rising sharply, and the family had been in short common since midsummer, well, she'd asked for it tonight for certain. But first she moved them. She went to the head of the stairs. Amelia, Peter, come up here and help me. Amelia, pesky though she was at times, was biddable, thank goodness. She She came running, dug her few belongings out of their mutual blanket chest, and carried them across the hall to the big front bedchamber. "Why are we moving in here, Rebecca? Father wouldn't like it if he knew we were moving in here." "Father wouldn't mind under the circumstances. It's because of the officer. If we're occupying the room, he won't be able to take it." "Will he be right across the hall, Rebecca?" "I don't think I want to have an officer right across the hall." "He won't hurt you," Rebecca said impatiently. "He probably won't even know he's here." She wished she believed that herself. "Well then, why did you say all those things to that man who was here? You said it wasn't suitable." "That's exactly what you said. It isn't suitable. I heard." "Be still, Amelia. Please. Peter, you can't bring that hoop in here. You'll scratch the good furniture." "Father let me keep it in my other room. Why can't I?" The squabble was resolved by taking the hoop down to the kitchen in the basement. Then, the move accomplished, and Amelia settled down to do her lessons, for Rebecca was haphazardly implanting the 3 R's. Rebecca brought her flax wheel into the bedroom, set it up before the window, and set to work, keeping one nervous eye on the street. There were plenty of soldiers about, and civilians too, as word got around that occupation was not, after all, the end of the world. Aides clattered past on horseback. Sentries appeared at various doors up and down Front Street. Small detachments of 6 or a dozen were marched by. Now and then some horse artillery rumbled under the window. The city seemed suddenly full of flies. Once the Ransoms heard one aide direct another to Cornwallis's new headquarters on Chestnut, between 4th and 5th Street. The Norris Mansion, Rebecca guessed. He would. It was the biggest house on Chestnut, and very handsome. Every time an epaulet appeared, she stiffened tensely. But none stopped, and after a while the clack and clatter began to seem cheerful instead of frightening, a relief from the unnerving silence of days past. By supper time, when no lodger had made an appearance, she began to breathe more easily. They ate cozily in the basement kitchen. There was nothing to spare but mush, and unsalted to boot, for there was a shortage in the city, and Ursula was husbanding their last coat. "This officer, this Englisher, who gives to pay rent?" Ursula demanded. "I don't think so." The barrack master said, "Bill it." "I tell you what it is, Miss Becky, how I am marketing with no money. I think it's time to sell brandy." Rebecca couldn't explain that she intended to get money that very evening. "At the moment there's nothing to buy," she said evasively. It was perfectly true. The city had had no provision wagons in days. And then it occurred to her that if she did get the money, she